Let us begin with the poem, A Legend of the Northland. First of all, the title when you read, you must know what is a legend. Legend is an old tradition. Legend is an old traditional story, right? A legend is something traditional which is passed on from generations to generations, right? For example, the stories, whether those characters lived or not, we don't know. Those characters existed or not, we don't know. But we hear the stories. Ask your mother, she would say, yes, I heard the same. She would pass it on to you. You would pass it on to the next generation, right? So legend is something traditional or old traditions or the old narrations which are passed on from one generation to another, right? Then here it is, a legend of the Northland. Now this Northland is, we are also in Northern Hemisphere, India, right? Yet Northland meaning the extreme north point of the earth, right? We have two poles, North Pole, South Pole, right? So this Northland refers to the areas adjacent to the North Pole. And the areas or the lands or the countries just near to the North Pole, they are Iceland, Greenland, right? Here is the map. You can well see. Here do you see the North Pole, right? This North Pole, all these areas near to this North Pole, they are called Northland, right? There is another thing also, another feature of the Northland, how the people recognize the Northland as. Northland is that very part of the earth, right and moon, where there are the hours of the day very few, meaning the days are very short, but the nights are very long. You will read in the poem also, you know, that the nights are so long, so the people, they find it very boring, uninteresting. Why? Because they sleep. And after their sufficient sleep, when they wake up, they still find the night. They still find darkness around. And then they are compelled, they are forced to sleep back. So that's how they find it very uninteresting, very monotonous. All right. So this is another feature of these Northlands, right? Is it clear, the legend in Northland?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now this poem, you must have noticed that the poem is pretty long, right? Why? Because this is not an ordinary poem. This is actually a ballad poem. A ballad poem meaning a narrative poem. A ballad poem is which is narrating an incident or a story. So in simpler words, we would say that ballad poem is a story poem, right? So it is a legend, as it has already been said in the title. We know it is going to be a story. And since it is a ballad poem, it is a story poem telling the story. Now, which story? That when you read, you will get to know, right? Ballads are usually, more ballads are usually narrative poems about the folk tales. Folk tales, पता है आपको किसको कहते हैं? Folk songs मालूम है?
Yes, ma'am.
जैसे folk songs होते हैं ना, लोकगीत, right? किसी particular region से related होते हैं, वैसे ही folk tales होती हैं. किसी particular region की कुछ stories हैं, उनको हम folk tales कहते हैं, right? So this ballad poem is usually telling the story, a folk tale of a particular region. This A Legend of the Northland that you are going to read, this is also narrating the story of a single saint and a woman. I will not tell you all the details, otherwise you would lose interest. In total, in the whole poem, there are 16 stanzas. Each stanza is consisted of 4 lines. Then there are poetic devices used. The story poem also has a theme, which we will discuss later. First, let me introduce you to the poet also, which is very important. The poet of this poem is Phoebe Kerry. Let us know about the poem, the poet. I hope you can see this on the screen.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's wonderful. Yes, here is a picture of Phoebe Kerry. The one to my right side is Phoebe Kerry. And the first woman, she is Alice Kerry. Alice Kerry and Phoebe Kerry, they were sisters. Now you must have thought, when Phoebe Kerry has written this story, this poem, why did I get the picture of Alice Kerry? The reason is both the sisters had written many poems jointly, collaboratively. And many of their joint anthologies, their collective, their collaborative poems, they had been published. Such was the bonding between the two sisters. When we read about Phoebe Kerry, of course, we cannot forget mentioning, discussing, and knowing about Alice as well. So here you see, Phoebe Kerry was an American poet. Both the women, they were poets. Both the women, they were American poets. Of course, they were siblings. And the youngest sister of the poet, Alice Kerry. The sisters co-published poems in 1849. I'm sorry, here I have written younger sister. In fact, Alice was the elder one, right? There was 4 years difference. Phoebe was born in 1824, but Alice was born in 1820. The sisters co-published poems in 1849. Co-published, meaning they both had written together and they both had got their poems published together. And then each went on to publish volumes of her own. In 1849, they had published their collaborative poems, which they had written together. And afterwards, they had written their own poems and they got them published, right? So they had written poems jointly as well as individually. After their deaths in 1871, joint anthologies of the sisters' unpublished poems were also compiled. After their deaths in 1871, meaning both the sisters, they died in 1871. First, Alice died, right? First, Alice died due to some ailment. I think, yes, due to malaria. First, she died. And then Phoebe was so sad, it was difficult for her to bear the loss of her sister. Then later on in July 31, 1871, Phoebe also died. Now, after their death, their joint anthologies meaning their poems which were written by them, but they were not published yet. Then they were jointly, they were together compiled and they were published. Phoebe Kerry was born on September 4, 1824 in Mount Healthy, Ohio, near Cincinnati in America. She and her sister Alice were raised on the Clover Mook farm in North College Hill, Ohio. They had settled in Ohio. They were born in Ohio. They were living in a farm. Both the sisters were liberal. They were liberal. They enjoyed and they believed in they believed in freedom of expression, freedom of their opinions, whether it is religion or politics or anything. And they were reformist. They were reformist. Whatever was wrong, they would condemn it and they would try to improvise that, and had been working actively for women's rights and freedom. Yes, if you read in detail about them, you will get to know that they had played an important role in such movements where there were some organizations fighting for the women's rights and freedom. While they occasionally attended school, the sisters were often needed to work at home and so were largely self-educated. They were not regular to the school. Most of the education they have got at home. So in this way, they were self-educated. Their mother died in 1835, and two sisters afterward, their father, and 2 years afterward, their father married again. They lost their mother in 1835, but after the mother's death, the father had remarried. Now they had a stepmother, and the stepmother did not treat them fairly. The stepmother was wholly unsympathetic regarding their literary aspirations. Both the girls, they had literary aspirations. Literary aspirations meaning they were poets, they were writing, they wanted to express themselves through poetry and wanted to get these published, but stepmother did not like these aspirations or this kind of skill. They were always ready and willing to aid in the household work. They had been helping her in the household work whenever required, but the sisters persisted in a determination to study and write when the day's work was done. There was a lot of household work they had to do, but it does not mean that they had given up writing. No, they were very passionate about writing. They had determined to study, they had determined to write. So whenever their work was finished, they would sit and they would start writing. Sometimes they were refused the use of candles to the extent of their wishes. Now you see that what it is, the household work also they had been doing. So at times they had to wake till late at night and do their work and write. And their use of candles, because at that time there was no electricity. So they were using candles. And they were objected by their stepmother. They were rejected, they were refused, they were not allowed to use the candles. But their passion for writing enabled them to fight all the challenges, and they would somehow manage after the family had retired. Family had retired, meaning after the family would be asleep, these girls, they would somehow manage to get some light and then start writing. Sick with malaria and grieving her sister's recent death, Kerry died on July 31, 1871. I hope it is clear to you about the poet.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, let's get back to the poem. Can you get back to the screen again?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Yes. Now this poem narrates the legend of an old lady who angered Saint Peter because of her greed. Saint Peter, here I've got a picture of Saint Peter. Saint Peter was a saint. He was an apostle. He was a disciple, a follower of Jesus Christ, who had been going from place to place, who had been preaching, who had been educating the people and sharing Jesus' teachings with the people. And in this way, he wanted to bring peace on the earth as promised by Jesus Christ, right? Now, the poem is the story of an old lady, the old lady who was a baker, who had been baking cakes, right? But what happened, what transpired in the story, that the old lady old lady's behavior had made Saint Peter angry. Though Saint Peter was very calm and very peace-loving, but he became enraged. Why? Because the lady appeared to be very greedy. Now, this behavior of the woman had compelled Saint Peter to be angry, and then how did he express his anger? You will read in the story, right? Okay. Away in the Northland, where the hours of the day are few, and the nights are so long in winter that they cannot sleep them through, where they harness the swift reindeer to the sledges when it snows, and the children look like bear's cubs in their funny furry clothes. Try to identify the poetic devices, okay? I have read alliteration and repetition as well. Away in the Northland. The poet has repeated the word away. Why? Because the story takes place at a very remote area, at a place far, far away in the Northland. Northland near to the North Pole. The place near to the North Pole is definitely far, far away from anyone's location, isn't it? That's why the poet has repeated the word away, in order to create an impact and make the readers understand that the story has happened somewhere nearby the North Pole, right? Away in the Northland. Now, what is that Northland? Northland, where the hours of the day are few. Hours of the day are few, meaning?
Means the days are short.
Very good. It means that the days are short. So Northland is that part of the earth near to the North Pole where the days are very short and the nights are so long in winter. And as compared to the days, the nights are so long, so very long that they cannot sleep them through. Do you understand who is they for?
Ma'am, the peoples they live
Right.
on Northland.
Very good. They refers to the people of Northland, right? That the nights are so long in winter that the people living in Northland, they cannot sleep throughout the night. Isn't it? Here we struggle to sleep and they get ample time to sleep, but they find it very monotonous. They cannot sleep all the night because the nights are so long. So this is Northland where the days are very short, but the nights are extremely long. Nights are very long in winters, so long that the people, even if they want to sleep, they cannot sleep for so long. I hope all the 4 lines are clear.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, now let's see what happens in the next stanza, where they harness the swift reindeer to the sledges. Northland is the place where the people harness. Harness meaning the people tie. People tie the swift reindeer. Swift, do you understand what does swift mean?
No, ma'am.
Swift means fast, right? Where the people tie the reindeers that run very fast to the sledges. The sledges are the carts which are pulled by the dogs or the reindeers on snowy hills. When it snows, Northland is the part of the earth when during winter heavy snow falls, the people tie the reindeers to their carts. Why? Because in Northland there is no other transport. So the people, they use sledges. Now what are these sledges? Let's see. Oh, yes. Can you see so many pictures?
Yes, ma'am.
Right? How the people, okay, I'll show you this. Yes. Yes, can you see this? Now look
Yes,
here.
ma'am.
This is the picture of Rovaniemi, Lapland, Finland. Right. That is near to the North Pole. This is the place, Rovaniemi, where Santa Claus lives. Right? So you see that this is the reindeer and this cart is the sledge.
Ma'am, they are using now in Northland.
Yes, it is still used. It is still used. Right? Shall we go back?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, just a minute. Yes. Can you see the screen again?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, where they harness, so this is what I took you to Finland for a moment, right? This Rovaniemi is the place where Santa Claus lives. The people send all the letters to Santa Claus. They are received here only, okay? That is just for your knowledge. Sometimes whenever you are free, you just surf on the net, you will find it. All right? Yes. And the children look like bear's cubs in their funny furry clothes. What the poet means to say that the children in the Northland, they look very funny as they are wearing furry clothes. Fur is warm, so they have to wear very warm clothes. Why? Because it's extremely cold in winter. And these children in this furry clothes, furry dresses, in the furry outfits, they look like bear cubs. Bear cubs, the offsprings, the young ones of the bear, right? Their skin is furry. So just they look like the bear cubs because they are wearing furry clothes. They are in furry attire. I hope it is clear.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. If any word is not clear, you can ask me again. Okay. Yes. They tell them a curious story. I don't believe it's true. And yet you may learn a lesson if I tell the tale to you. They tell them a curious story. The people in the Northland, they tell their children a strange story. They tell their children a legend. I don't believe it's true. When the poet says, I don't believe it's true, the poet does not think that the story that the parents or the people they tell their children that could be a true story. He says, no, I don't think it is true. So the legends are not necessarily the true stories, right? And yet you may learn a lesson. Now the point here is when they are not the true stories, why do the people tell their children these stories? Because every story carries a lesson, right? Every story has a moral theme, a moral lesson. So the poet says that I am also, if I tell the tale to you, tale meaning story, I am also telling you this legend of the Northland through this poem. I am also telling you the story so that you learn a lesson. Right in the beginning, we have got to know that the woman in the story is a greedy woman. Right. The woman in the story is a negative character who angered Saint Peter. So somewhere there is the theme or the lesson of the poem or the story poem around there only. I hope it is clear, each and every word.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Once when the good Saint Peter lived in the world below and walked about it preaching, just as he did, you know. He came to the door of a cottage in traveling round the earth, where a little woman was making cakes and baking them on the hearth. Now, what is the story? Here is the story that poet is sharing with you. Once, when the good Saint Peter, why good Saint Peter? Saint Peter was the follower of Jesus Christ. Saint Peter was the apostle of peace. Saint Peter was the disciple of Jesus Christ. So of course he is good. When we say good, it does not mean good that is opposite of bad only, right? It means holy also. It means respectable also. So this word good here carries respect for Saint Peter, right? Once when Saint Peter lived in this world, lived in the world below. Now, what is this world below? Can you make out, Anmol, what is this world below?
No, ma'am.
Yes, I tell you. You see that what do we believe? The heaven and the earth. Isn't it? Where
Yes,
do we
ma'am.
believe that where is the heaven?
Ma'am, on the earth, upon the earth.
The heaven is above. The sky is above, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So we believe that the heaven is above and down the heaven is, below is the earth, that is the world. Right? This is what we believe. So when he says lived in the world below, meaning in this human world, when Saint Peter lived in this human world, he used to walk about, he used to wander, he used to travel from one place to another. Why? To preach, to teach, to share the teachings of Jesus Christ with the people. He wanted to enlighten them with the teachings of Jesus Christ so that the people do not follow unfair means or violent means, and there is peace in this world. Is that clear? He says, and walked about it preaching just as he did, Meaning, meaning the world knows, everyone knows that Saint Peter had been walking around preaching just as he did. He was a saint, he was a follower of Jesus. So it was his duty to preach, so he would never rest. He would keep traveling, preaching or sharing Jesus' teachings with the people. I hope it is clear, these 4 lines.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So while he had been preaching, while he had been traveling from place to place, once what happened, he came to the door of a cottage. There was a cottage. He was just passing by that cottage and he found that the door was opened. He came to the door of a cottage in traveling around the earth. While he was,
Ma'am, what does mean cottage means?
Cottage is hut, cottage is house, right? Like we have our house made of concrete, fully made of concrete, right? Cottage is just like a hut that has sloping roof and the roof made up of straw and all. Okay?
Okay.
Yes. He came to the door of a cottage. He came to the door of a house, a small hut, while he was traveling around the earth, preaching Jesus' teachings. In that cottage, he found a little woman. Where? Meaning in that cottage. A little woman was making cakes. He found the little woman who was making cakes and baking them on the hearth. Hearth is, here can you see the picture?
Yes, ma'am.
This is hearth. Hearth is the fireplace, right? This is the fireplace, or you can say this is a kind of oven, which is not electrical, right? But here you just use the fuel, the natural fuel, that is wood, and then you cook or you bake, right? In the ancient times, these fireplaces used to be there for cooking and baking in the houses. So while he was traveling, he came across this cottage and he found the little woman. She was making cakes. He saw her that she was baking cakes on the hearth in this oven, right? and being faint with fasting, for the day was almost done, he asked her from her store of cakes to give him a single one. Try to understand. And being faint with fasting, being faint, tired, right? He was very tired with fasting because he had been traveling around, and with fasting meaning he had been hungry. He had been traveling around for long and he had not eaten anything. So he was hungry, for the day was almost done. The day was about to end, right? The day was about to end and he had not eaten anything. So he was feeling faint, meaning he was feeling very weak. He was feeling tired. He was feeling hungry. He was feeling tired and hungry. So when he saw the little woman making cakes, he asked her that he had seen that many other cakes were lying there, which were already done, which were already baked, right? So he asked the woman to give him a single cake from the store of cakes, from the stock of the cakes that she had already made. She had piled up those cakes which she made, right? And when he saw that she had enough of the cakes, he asked the little woman to give him also one cake as he was so hungry and tired. I hope it is clear.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. What do you think that the little woman would give him the cake?
Ma'am, of course, she will give because he is a saint.
He is a saint. Okay. Does the woman know that he is a saint?
Ma'am, repeat, please.
I said, does the woman know that he is a saint?
Ma'am, I think she know.
Okay. All right. Anyway, let's read the legend. So she made a very little cake, but as it baking lay, she looked at it and thought it seemed too large to give away. Now, this is very interesting, right? She already had lot many cakes which were already made. If she wanted, she could give one cake from that stock, isn't it? But she didn't. Why? Because she thought that all those cakes were too big and she never wanted to give away a bigger one. So what she did, she made a very little cake. She thought only a little portion is to be given away. It happens. Many a times we humans do it, isn't it? Even if we have something in plenty, but when we have to share it with someone, we share only a small portion of it, isn't it? So the woman is representing the humans actually. So she made a very little cake, but as it baking lay, she made a very small cake, a very little cake. And as she kept it for baking, she looked at the cake and she thought, she found what? That the cake that she had made, that she had baked, a smaller cake, but it was looking too large. It was looking so big that she could not give away, meaning she could not give it as a charity to Saint Peter. She could not give away. She could not share it with the saint because she had been making a small cake as she never wanted to give away a bigger one. So when the small cake she made, she found that it was growing big. So she dropped the idea. She just withdrew the idea. Now, what do you think she would do?
Ma'am, I think she will give
Yes, she'll give.
another one cake.
Okay. Therefore, she needed another and still a smaller one. But it looked, when she turned it over, as large as the first had done. No one moved. She did not give away that cake because she thought it's big, a bigger cake, I will not give it to someone. Right? So what she did, she kneaded another. Kneaded meaning mixed. She mixed all the ingredients of the cake and she mixed the dough. She made the dough and she made another cake and again she made a smaller one. Right? Again, she made a smaller one. When she was making a smaller one, whereas she had been keeping so many large cakes, had you been there in place of the woman, Anmol, what would you have done? Would you have been making smaller ones or you would have given one of all the large cakes that you had?
Ma'am, that I had bigger one.
Then you would have given the bigger one, right? But no. Now, what does that suggest about the woman? What kind of woman is she?
Ma'am, greedy.
Greedy. She is so greedy. She has greed. She is not ready to part with the bigger cakes, though she has so many. Right? So she keeps on making smaller one. Again, she makes another one. And again, she makes a smaller cake. But when the cake was ready from one side, she turned it over. What she found? That the cake had become as big as the first one or the other cakes. Isn't it? Now, what do you think? Why do you think it was happening? God is perhaps testing the woman, right? This is the test of the humans, that you are so greedy you can't part with your portion, that you are making smaller one. But every time you make small, still it grows big. So why not to share the same? But no, despite that, woman would not, because she is greedy. So do you understand this lesson of the story?
Yes, ma'am.
Right? That we are so greedy, we are not ready to share. Whereas if we share, we will have satisfaction, we will have contentment. And if we have contentment, then we will have peace. This is what Saint Peter wanted to teach her a lesson, but she did not understand. Then she took a tiny scrap of dough and rolled it flat and baked it thin as a wafer, but she couldn't part with that. She took she took a small scrap of dough, a small portion of dough. Dough, do you know?
Yes, ma'am.
डो समझ में आता है ना, जैसे आटा गूंथते हैं तो वो डो बन जाता है, right? हाँ. So she took a small portion of dough, right? Because she thought that smaller the portion of dough she'll take, it would give a small cake, right? Then she rolled it flat, and she made a thin cake as thin as a wafer. Wafer जो आप खाते हैं ना, Lay's chips खाते हैं आप, they are wafers, right? But she couldn't part with that. Again, that wafer kind cake also turned bigger, and she didn't give away that cake also because it was big. She wanted to give a small one. But she said, my cakes that seem too small when I eat of them myself are yet too large to give away. So she put them on the shelf. Why she is not ready to part with this? Why she is not ready to give away? Because she said, she thought when she eats her cakes that she makes, right, then all these cakes, they appear to be very small. Right? My cakes that seem too small when I eat of them myself. She says, when I eat, they appear to be very small. And when I have to give away, they become so large. So she puts them again on the shelf and she does not give away any cake to Saint Peter. Right? Can it happen that she would, when she is eating, she would find them small, but when she has to give away, she finds it large?
Ma'am, it couldn't.
Yes.
Ma'am, because they make she makes same same size.
Uh-huh.
But when she makes for Saint Peter a cake, she makes too small.
Right, right. But then also it becomes big, right? What is it? This reflects her mind. This reflects her state of mind. Because when she is making the cake, she does not think that I am making this because someone is hungry. So I have to give it to one who is hungry. I have to give it to one to help him, right? She simply thinks that I have to give away. I have to part with this, right? She has that state of mind. She has that thought. That's why to her it appears. उसको लगता है कि केक तो मैं छोटा बनाती हूँ लेकिन ये इतना बड़ा बन जाता है. Because even if the cake remains small, she would not be ready to part with that. Why? Because she is so greedy. Is that clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Clear to you? Shall I go to the next?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Then good Saint Peter grew angry, for he was hungry and faint. And surely such a woman was enough to provoke a saint. Now, good Saint Peter, he had been waiting and waiting for the cake that the lady is making one after another cake, and she would give him the cake. But she didn't. So Saint Peter, though he was peace-loving, though he was very calm, yet he becomes furious. He becomes angry. Why? Because actually he was very hungry. Actually, he was tired. He was hungry and tired. He wanted something to eat. And you see that what happens, Anmol? When you are tired, when you are hungry, something is lying before you and you cannot eat, whereas you want to eat. At that time, doesn't it happen that you feel so helpless?
Yes, ma'am.
Isn't it? You are hungry, you are tired, you visit someone's house, right? There is something lying on the table. You are so hungry that you want to eat. But you will wait that the host would offer you, isn't it? And it
Yes,
is very
ma'am.
difficult for you. It is very difficult for you to resist yourself, to control yourself. You are so helpless. Same is the situation with Saint Peter. Saint Peter was so terribly hungry and tired that he wanted to eat the cake. He wanted to eat something which the woman could offer, the woman could provide. And he had asked. And even then, she is making one after another. So she made Saint Peter angry. He became furious. He became very angry. And surely such a woman was enough to provoke a saint. Why this line has been added by the poet? She means to say that he was a saint. He was a divine soul. A saint cannot be angry. But the woman has provoked her, the woman has compelled her to be angry. Saint Peter was otherwise peace-loving, very humble, very polite and soft. But the woman had been testing his patience. The saint who was so tired, who was so hungry, and she was taking so long. In fact, she did not offer, she did not get him, she did not give away a small cake to him. So in this way, she compelled him to be angry. He is not by nature short-tempered man, but the woman had made the woman had made him short-tempered. Is that clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Right? And he said, you are far too selfish to dwell in a human form, to have both food and shelter and fire to keep you warm. Saint Peter, he was so angry that he poured out his anger onto the woman. he expressed his anger and anguish onto the woman. He said he was so annoyed. He told the woman, "You are too selfish." He told the little woman that the little woman was so selfish to dwell in a human form. You are so selfish that you cannot be, you do not deserve to be a human, to dwell in a human form. To dwell in a human form, meaning to become a human, to become a mankind. He says, you are so selfish that you do not deserve to be called to be a human. तुम इतनी selfish हो कि तुम इंसान बनने के लायक नहीं हो. In simpler words. Do you understand that?
Yes, ma'am.
Right? So he says that you are so selfish that she was selfish, no? How do you say that? How do we think that she is selfish?
Because ma'am, they make cake for Saint Peter, but they make smaller than smaller cake for him.
She is not ready to part with her cakes. She keeps the bigger cakes with herself. And she is still trying to give a small cake only to Saint Peter. So that expresses that how selfish the woman was. To have both food and shelter. He said, God has blessed you with food and shelter, meaning you have got a good house where you can get food as a human. You have got fire to keep you warm, meaning you are living such a comfortable life in this house where you can warm yourself, you can feed yourself. But you don't deserve to enjoy all this. You don't deserve to be that human being who could enjoy all this. What does it mean? Just try to understand, Anmol. There is a deep meaning behind it. The meaning is that if you just go to the biblical stories, कभी Bible की stories आप पढ़ेंगे ना, तो उसमें आप पढ़ेंगे कि Adam and Eve were the first man and the woman. Have you heard that?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Adam and Eve, according to the Bible, Adam and Eve, Adam the first man and Eve the first woman on the earth. God had sent these two to the earth, right, to help the human beings, to tell the humans that if they have been given this life, if they have been given this world to live, then they have to live in harmony by helping each other, by sharing with each other. So Bible says human means you share with each other. You are all the social beings. So this is what Saint Peter is trying to say, that as human you have come to this earth, you are living in this world where you are enjoying everything that a human should enjoy. Meaning you are getting a good house, you are getting the food to eat, you are getting everything to keep yourself warm, but you are not sharing, but you are keeping everything to yourself, meaning you are so selfish. Since you are so selfish, you don't deserve to live a human life. Is that clear? Don't we say that we human beings should always help each other? If somebody needs my help, I am not helping. Do you think that I will be satisfied in my life?
No, ma'am. We will help to each other.
Right, right it is. If I don't help, deliberately I don't help, I will never be satisfied. Definitely I would have anxiety somewhere. कहीं ना कहीं एक guilt रहेगा कि हाँ मैंने help नहीं की. Isn't it? Or
Yes, ma'am.
sometimes when it returns to me in one or the other form. Is that clear? I hope these 4 lines are clear to you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now you shall build as the birds do, and shall get your scanty food by boring and boring and boring all day in the hard, dry wood. St. Peter's gets so angry that he curses the little woman. And he tells the woman, you shall build as the birds do. Now you will not be enjoying this warm home that you are enjoying right now. Now you will make your home, you will make your nest as the birds make their nest, and shall get your scanty food. Now you will not get sufficient food to eat. Scanty is short. Now you will not get, you will get scanty food. You will not get sufficient food to eat. And you will have to struggle to get the food. And how you will get the food? You will be boring and boring and boring. Boring and boring is you would have to peck. You would have to peck. You will have to dig. You will have to dig to find the food like the birds. You will keep on digging the dry wood. You will spend the whole day in digging the wood, in making a hole through the wood to get some food. Because you have tested my patience, you have made me starved. Now you will also be starved. Now you will also stay hungry. And to satisfy your hunger, you will keep boring. Now what is that? Let me tell you. Yes, here is a small YouTube video that you will see. आप इसको देखो, picture को ध्यान से देखो. You see that how she is boring, how she is pecking. Could you recognize this bird?
Yes, ma'am. Woodpecker.
Yes. How it is pecking? You see, with its beak, it is digging the wood. Yes. Making hole. Why it is making hole? That is to find something to eat. Right? And the whole day in this way, the woodpecker keeps on pecking the wood to get something to eat. This is how the little woman, she had been cursed by Saint Peter. Is that clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, child. Then here I got the picture of woodpecker also, right? Just look at the structure of woodpecker, right? Then tomorrow we will continue the rest of the poem and we will discuss the exercises also, right?
Okay, ma'am.
But you please do revise the poem. If any problem anywhere, you will ask me first. Okay? First we will
Okay, ma'am.
recapitalize and then we will proceed.
Good evening, ma'am.
Okay, good evening. Bye.